This story is inspired by true events, but all names and details have been changed to protect the identities of those involved. Imagine being alone in a small town in the United States, exhausted after a long trip, just looking for a moment of rest and something to eat. The sun was already hiding behind the hills, and the quiet streets seemed welcoming, but there was something in the air that made your heart race for no apparent reason. Every step toward the humble restaurant echoed in the stillness of the town, and in that moment, no one could have imagined that a simple dinner outing would change the lives of everyone there forever. As she walked inside, she felt the curious eyes and respectful silence of the few customers present. But then, something unexpected happened. Men with suspicious intentions began to approach, and the sense of danger became real. Fear mixed with adrenaline made every second feel like an eternity. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the clinking of cups, and the faint smell of warm bread contrasted sharply with the palpable tension in the air. It was at that moment that someone ordinary, a quiet waiter, made an extraordinary choice. Without hesitation, he stepped between the danger and her, challenging not only the men who threatened her but also every limit of what an ordinary person is expected to do. A courageous act that would turn that night into an unforgettable memory and create consequences no one could have imagined. And here's where I want to hear from you. Which city or state do you think this could have happened in? Comment below. Let's see how far this story could travel and how a single act of bravery can touch hearts anywhere in the country. Introduction. After hours of travel, she finally stepped off the bus into the quiet streets of a small town in the American Midwest. Her legs ached and her body screamed for rest, but more than anything, she was hungry. She had only wanted a simple meal and a place to catch her breath, a few moments of normalcy away from the chaos of her life as a professional athlete. The sun was dipping behind rolling hills, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, and the town seemed to welcome her with an almost surreal calm. Yet, beneath that calm, something felt off. Every step she took echoed softly against the cracked pavement. The streets were nearly empty, save for a few scattered locals closing shops or heading home. There was a stillness here that was almost too perfect, as if the town itself was holding its breath, watching, waiting. She tightened her jacket around her, a subtle shiver running down her spine. She told herself it was just fatigue, but a nagging unease lingered at the edges of her awareness. She turned a corner and saw a small restaurant tucked between two aging storefronts. The sign swung gently in the evening breeze, its paint chipped but the name readable, Miller's Diner. The faint smell of freshly baked bread and coffee wafted through the air. A bell jingled as she pushed the door open, the warm light spilling onto her tired face. It was exactly what she had hoped for, a quiet, humble place to rest. Inside, the diner felt timeless. Wooden tables bore the marks of decades, the counters shined with the polish of countless hands, and the aroma of cooking food wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. The few customers glanced up as she entered, their eyes curious but not intrusive. Behind the counter, a man in a simple apron wiped down glasses, his expression calm but alert. Something about him radiated steadiness, a sense of quiet vigilance that went unnoticed by most but not by her. She slid into a booth by the window, her back to the door, and exhaled, letting herself finally sink into the chair. For a moment, the fatigue melted away, replaced by a fragile sense of relief. But that sensation was fleeting. A subtle tension hung in the air, something unspoken, almost imperceptible. It was a feeling she had learned to recognize after years on the road, the instinct that tells you something is about to change your life in an instant. As she scanned the diner, taking in the simple menu and the faint hum of conversation, a chill ran down her spine. It wasn't the weather. It wasn't even the loneliness of the small town. It was the quiet sense that the ordinary could shift in the blink of an eye, and that tonight, it very well might. And as she sat there, sipping the first hot cup of coffee she had tasted in hours, she couldn't have imagined that what began as a simple stop for dinner would become a night that tested courage, revealed heroes, and created a story that would ripple far beyond this little town. The humble diner was small, but it carried a warmth that was immediately comforting. Wooden booths lined the walls, each one worn from decades of use, their leather cracked but soft, as if they had absorbed every story ever told within those walls. The linoleum floor bore the faint scuff marks of hurried steps and quiet laughter, and the walls were decorated with faded photographs of the town in earlier decades, kids playing in the streets, high school football teams celebrating victories, and families gathered for holiday dinners. The place felt alive, not in a flashy, bustling way, but in a quiet, steady rhythm that made anyone who entered feel grounded. Behind the counter stood the man who would unknowingly become the hero of this story. He was not tall or imposing, nor did he have the kind of presence that demanded attention. Yet there was something about the way he moved, confident but unhurried, careful but observant, that suggested he noticed everything, even the smallest details. His dark hair was slightly tousled, his apron dusted with flour, and his hands bore the subtle calluses of someone who worked hard every day. He greeted every customer with a polite nod or a brief smile, never overbearing, but always aware. She watched him quietly, noting the steadiness in his movements, the calm in his demeanor. It was the kind of presence that offered reassurance without saying a word, the sort of human anchor that made you feel safe in a world that often felt unpredictable. She found herself relaxing just a little more, sipping her coffee and feeling the warmth seep into her bones, even as a flicker of caution still lingered at the back of her mind. The diner's atmosphere was comforting, yes, but there was also a subtle tension beneath the surface, a feeling she couldn't quite place. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft clatter of dishes, and the low murmur of conversation all combined into a gentle, predictable rhythm. Yet, every now and then, a shadow would pass by the window, or a lingering glance from a nearby patron would make her senses sharpen. It was the kind of feeling that told you, tonight, something was going to happen. Something out of the ordinary. She noticed a few locals scattered around the diner, quietly eating their meals or reading the newspaper. Their presence was unobtrusive, but there was a strange energy in their casual glances, curiosity, maybe, but also a faint wariness, as if they, too, had learned that life in a small town sometimes held surprises. The diner itself seemed to hold its breath in anticipation, a silent witness to the moments that were about to unfold. As she sat, tracing the rim of her coffee cup with her fingers, she felt the contrast between the simple normalcy of the diner and the gnawing sense of unease that had accompanied her since she arrived. The warmth of the room wrapped around her, but her instincts whispered that the ordinary calm would not last. Someone was about to disrupt this delicate balance, and she could feel it, like the faint tremor before a storm. And yet, despite the tension, the diner remained a sanctuary in its own quiet way. It was a place where stories had begun and ended countless times, where strangers could find comfort and courage in small, everyday gestures. Unbeknownst to her, she was about to become part of one of those stories, a night where bravery would shine in the most unexpected form, and where an ordinary person would rise to meet a challenge that no one could have predicted. The goons appear for a few moments. The diner seemed like a sanctuary, a small island of calm in the quiet town. She breathed in the warm aroma of coffee and fresh bread, letting her muscles finally relax. But the sense of unease that had followed her through the streets earlier didn't completely fade. She could feel it lurking at the edges of her awareness, like the shadow of a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. It started subtly at first. The bell above the door jingled, and she glanced up, expecting perhaps a late customer or a delivery man. Instead, 3 men entered, their presence immediately different from the locals she had seen before. Their jackets were worn but deliberate, each movement exuding confidence and intimidation. There was something calculated about the way they surveyed the diner, eyes flicking over every corner, taking in the patrons and lingering a little longer on her. Her instincts screamed caution. She could feel her heart rate increase, the warmth in the diner now mixing with the cold prickle of anxiety. These were not ordinary townsfolk. She had seen people like them before, men who believed their size, their presence, or their position gave them the right to control others. And right now, she could feel their eyes on her, assessing, testing, challenging. One of them, the tallest of the 3, moved closer, leaning casually against a booth not far from hers. His gaze lingered on her in a way that was invasive, unwelcome, and threatening. He smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a calculated attempt to unsettle. The others positioned themselves strategically, blocking easy exits, their presence silently asserting dominance over the small space. She felt her fingers tighten around the coffee cup, the warmth of the liquid now a tenuous comfort against the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Her mind raced. She had faced opponents on the field, pressures from crowds, and media scrutiny, but this was different. This was unpredictable. This was personal. The diner seemed to shrink around her, every table, every chair, every patron suddenly part of the stage where the danger was unfolding. She noticed the subtle shifts, the way other customers avoided eye contact, the quiet intake of breath from the woman at the counter, the way the waiter's movements paused for a split second, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly as if assessing the threat. The tension in the air was almost tangible. Every second stretched, charged with anticipation and fear. She could feel the potential for conflict, the fragile line between safety and chaos. Her instincts whispered a warning. Something had to happen, and soon, or this night could take a turn that no one would forget. As the tallest man stepped closer, his voice low and smooth, she realized that the threat was not just physical, it was psychological. The intent behind their approach was clear: to intimidate, to provoke, to unsettle. The diner, once a haven, had transformed into a crucible of tension. And yet, in that moment, as fear mingled with determination, she sensed something else: the presence of someone who might defy expectation, someone ordinary who could do something extraordinary. Her eyes met the waiter's across the room. There was a flicker of recognition, not of knowing her identity, but of understanding the injustice taking place before him. A silent promise passed between them, a promise that courage, when it appears, often comes from the most unexpected places. In that quiet exchange, the stage was set. The danger was real, immediate, and undeniable. But as the first move was about to be made, she felt a strange, almost imperceptible calm settle over her. Something told her that the night was far from over, and that the ordinary could soon become heroic. The waiter steps in for a moment. It seemed the diner might explode into chaos. The tallest of the men, the one whose gaze had been lingering far too long, took a deliberate step closer, his smile curling in a way that sent a shiver down her spine. The other two flanked him, creating a wall of menace that made the small space feel even more confining. Every instinct she had screamed for her to flee, to escape, to vanish into the night outside. But she was trapped in that booth, surrounded by tables, chairs, and the silent, fearful glances of other patrons. And then, he moved. The waiter, who had been quietly wiping glasses just moments before, straightened, his eyes locking onto the intruders with a focus that was sharp and unwavering. There was no hesitation in his stance, no second thoughts. He took a single step forward, the sound of his shoes against the linoleum floor distinct in the tense silence. The air seemed to shift around him, a subtle but undeniable presence of someone who refused to be intimidated. "Hey," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that demanded attention. The word alone was enough to cut through the growing tension, a clear line drawn between right and wrong. The tallest man paused, eyebrow raising, as if surprised that someone so ordinary could dare challenge him. She watched, heart pounding, as the waiter positioned himself between her and the three men. His body language was firm but non-aggressive, a barrier, a shield. The subtle authority in his stance told them that he would not back down. And in that moment, she realized something profound: courage is not always loud or flashy. Sometimes, it comes in quiet, unwavering steps, in the decision to stand when most would run. The tallest man took another step, attempting to intimidate, but the waiter's gaze never wavered. "Back off," he said simply. No theatrics, no yelling, just a statement of truth, of protection, of justice. The other two men exchanged uneasy glances. The air crackled with tension, a precarious balance between aggression and restraint. Time seemed to stretch. Every breath, every glance, every tiny movement carried weight. She could feel the danger pressing in from all sides, but there was also a strange sense of relief that someone was there, that someone ordinary was choosing to defy the extraordinary threat. The waiter's courage acted like a shield, not just physically, but emotionally, allowing her to breathe, to feel that fear was not the end, that safety was possible. Minutes felt like hours, and yet the standoff held. Patrons shifted nervously in their seats, some avoiding eye contact, some silently rooting for the man who had put himself between them and danger. The diner had become a stage where the lines between heroism and normalcy blurred, where an ordinary man became extraordinary simply by choosing to act. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the tallest man stepped back, his arrogance faltering under the steady gaze of someone who refused to be cowed. The other two followed, retreating toward the door, muttering threats that seemed weaker than intended. The diner exhaled collectively, the tension slowly lifting, though the impact of the moment lingered like a shadow. She remained in the booth for a moment longer, her heart still racing, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at the waiter, who had returned to his station as if nothing had happened, calm and composed, though she could see the faint tightness in his jaw betraying the effort it had taken to protect her. In that instant, she realized that heroism does not always come from fame, power, or influence. Sometimes it comes from someone willing to risk the ordinary, to stand up when no one else will. And as she took a tentative sip of her now lukewarm coffee, she felt a deep, unshakable gratitude for the man who had chosen courage over convenience, bravery over fear. She didn't reveal who she was. Not yet. But she knew, with absolute certainty, that this small act of defiance, this simple choice to stand between her and danger, would leave a mark on her, on the diner, and on a story that was only just beginning. The quiet gratitude the danger had passed, but the air in the diner still felt charged, like the lingering hum of a storm after the clouds have begun to break. She remained seated in her booth, staring down at the cup of coffee that had long since cooled, her fingers tracing the rim absent-mindedly. The warmth that had once comforted her now felt distant, replaced by the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She knew she had just witnessed something extraordinary, something that went beyond courage or instinct. The waiter had returned to his station behind the counter, resuming his work as though nothing had happened, polishing glasses, arranging napkins, and serving a couple of remaining customers with the same quiet attentiveness. To anyone else, he appeared to be just another ordinary man, fulfilling the simple duties of a diner employee. But she knew better. She had seen him in action. She had seen him choose bravery in a moment when fear could have been justified, and she would carry the image of him standing firm against the three men for the rest of her life. She wanted to say something, to express the depth of her gratitude, but words felt inadequate. How could she encapsulate the mix of fear, relief, and awe she felt in a single sentence? How could she convey the unspoken acknowledgement that what he had done was rare, profound, and selfless? She had learned long ago that some gestures don't require recognition, some heroes don't need applause, and some acts of courage are their own reward. Still, she found a way to offer thanks, subtle but heartfelt. "Thank you," she whispered as she gathered her things, her voice quiet enough that only he could hear. Her eyes met his for a brief second, and she saw a flicker of understanding in his gaze. It was the recognition of a moment shared, a truth acknowledged without spectacle or fanfare. And though she did not reveal her identity, he knew, without needing to be told, that his actions had mattered in a way that transcended the ordinary. As she stepped toward the door, the evening light casting long shadows across the diner floor, she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Outside, the streets of the small town seemed even quieter, almost reflective, as if they too had paused to witness the invisible thread of heroism that had just unfolded. The cool air on her face was a stark contrast to the warmth inside, but it was a welcome sensation, a reminder that the world still held both danger and protection, fear and courage, often existing side by side. She walked slowly, savoring the fleeting sense of normalcy, aware that the ordinary could shift at any moment. The town, the diner, the very streets themselves had become a backdrop for something larger than herself, a narrative that would ripple far beyond the few minutes of her visit. She knew that what had occurred inside those walls would stay with her forever, a memory of human bravery that demanded no reward but deserved every ounce of respect. As she paused by the curb, she looked back at the diner one last time. The glow from the windows was soft, warm, and inviting, a beacon that had offered safety when she needed it most. She imagined the life of the waiter continuing after this night, returning to his routine, serving coffee and meals, perhaps unaware of the profound impact he had made. But she knew it, and that knowledge filled her with a quiet sense of hope. It was in that quiet hope that she realized something fundamental. The world is often shaped not by the famous or the powerful, but by ordinary people willing to act when it matters most. Courage does not always wear a badge or command attention. Sometimes, it wears an apron, wipes down glasses, and stands silently in the face of intimidation. And sometimes, it changes the course of a life in ways that words alone cannot capture. She turned to leave, stepping into the calm streets, her heart still thumping but her spirit lighter. Somewhere in the night, the faint sound of a door closing behind her seemed to echo the unspoken gratitude she carried with her. She had not revealed who she was, and perhaps she never would, but the story of that night, and of the man who had risked himself for her, was etched into her memory. It was a story of bravery, of integrity, and of quiet heroism, a story that deserved to be remembered. As she walked away, she allowed herself a small, private smile. One day, perhaps, the world would know what had happened inside that humble diner, how an ordinary man became a hero, and how a single act of courage could ripple far beyond the walls of a small town. The town reacts. The night settled over the small town like a quiet blanket, but the impact of what had occurred inside the humble diner rippled far beyond those walls. News travels differently in a place like this, slower than a city, perhaps, but with a persistence that can't be underestimated. By the next morning, whispers had begun to circulate among the townspeople, carried on the wind through grocery stores, gas stations, and coffee shops. Someone had seen the unusual confrontation. Someone had noticed the courage of a man who had stepped into danger without hesitation. She stayed in the town, blending in, careful to maintain her anonymity. Even without revealing her identity, she could feel the echoes of the previous night everywhere she went. People seemed more alert, glances exchanged over cups of coffee or across counters carrying an unspoken acknowledgement. Something extraordinary had happened here, and someone had done the right thing when it mattered most. The diner itself became the center of attention, though it remained unchanged in appearance. The same worn booths, the same polished counters, the same soft hum of conversation filled the space. Yet there was a subtle shift in energy. The locals who had been present the night before lingered longer over their meals, speaking in low tones about courage, bravery, and the rare sight of an ordinary person doing something truly heroic. Each mention of the waiter's name carried a mix of awe and respect. By mid-morning, even the quietest patrons who had avoided the scene were speaking about it. Some wondered aloud about the identity of the young woman he had protected, while others speculated about what might have happened if he had not intervened. The story, though incomplete, was already growing in significance. It became more than a simple act of defense. It was a demonstration of integrity, bravery, and moral clarity that resonated deeply in a town where ordinary life usually followed predictable patterns. The waiter, for his part, went about his day with his usual calm demeanor, wiping down tables, serving coffee, and greeting customers. To anyone who did not know, he was the same quiet man they had seen every day. But those who had witnessed the previous night's events, or who had heard about them from friends and neighbors, looked at him differently. Respect was visible in subtle nods, in the way conversations paused when he walked by, in the careful way people acknowledged him without words. Meanwhile, rumors began to weave together into a larger narrative. The presence of someone extraordinary, a professional athlete, a member of a national team, added weight to the story, though no one outside the diner could confirm it. The whispers painted a picture of bravery, humility, and quiet heroism, sparking curiosity and admiration across the community. Everyone wanted to know more, yet the story remained tantalizingly incomplete, preserving the tension and anticipation that made it all the more compelling. Even in her own mind, she felt the growing weight of what had happened. Though she had remained anonymous, she was acutely aware of the ripple effects. Courage, she realized, was contagious. The act of one ordinary man standing up against danger had inspired conversations, reflections, and a sense of hope that stretched far beyond the walls of the diner. The town, in its quiet way, was beginning to recognize that heroism does not require fame, accolades, or recognition. It often comes from those who least expect it. By the afternoon, it became clear that the story would not stay contained for long. Locals began suggesting ways to honor the waiter, small gestures that could convey gratitude and acknowledgement. Some mentioned plaques, others whispered about awards, and a few bold voices even suggested inviting someone significant from the wider world to recognize his courage. It was as if the town itself wanted to amplify the message: bravery matters, and those who act with integrity should be celebrated. And as the day faded into evening, a sense of anticipation hung in the air, mingling with the scent of home-cooked meals and the gentle hum of a town settling into night. Something was about to happen, something that would bring the quiet heroism of one ordinary man into the spotlight in a way no one could have predicted. And though she remained unseen, she could feel the momentum building, a quiet certainty that the ordinary had a way of becoming extraordinary when the world needed it most. The team's surprise arrival at the diner was quiet that evening, its warm glow spilling onto the empty streets outside. Patrons had come and gone, and the familiar rhythm of the small-town restaurant had begun to settle once more. Yet, beneath the calm, there was a palpable tension, a sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. The whispers that had circulated through the town all day hinted at an approaching event, and the diner seemed to hum with anticipation, as if it too were waiting. She sat in her usual booth, careful to keep her presence unnoticed, savoring the calm before the storm. She had remained anonymous, blending in with the locals, but the impact of the previous night's events still lingered in her mind. The memory of the waiter standing firmly against the three men, the courage, the steadiness, the quiet defiance, was vivid, almost tangible. She could feel it in the air, a tension that had yet to fully release. Then, the bell above the door jingled, and the sound carried differently this time. It wasn't the casual entrance of a customer. It was deliberate, energetic, almost ceremonial. She glanced up, her heart quickening with anticipation, and that's when she saw them. The U.S. women's soccer team had arrived, filling the doorway with laughter, chatter, and the unmistakable aura of fame and achievement. Their presence immediately transformed the diner from a quiet refuge into a stage for something monumental. The players moved with effortless confidence, yet there was a warmth in their smiles, a genuine curiosity and friendliness that immediately put the few remaining patrons at ease. They navigated the diner carefully, scanning the tables and the counter, their eyes landing briefly on the young woman in the booth. She remained quiet, careful not to reveal her identity, but she felt an odd mix of anticipation and relief. She had known this visit was coming, and yet, experiencing it firsthand was something else entirely. The waiter, who had returned to his station and continued his work with calm efficiency, noticed them immediately. His eyes widened subtly, a flash of disbelief passing across his face before being replaced by composure. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. The ordinary man who had acted with such courage only days before was about to receive recognition in a way no one could have predicted. As the team approached the counter, their attention shifted to him. There were handshakes, words of gratitude, and laughter mingling with admiration. He stood still, initially unsure how to respond, but gradually, a smile spread across his face, a mixture of humility and quiet pride. This was not just recognition, it was validation of every instinct, every step of courage, every moment of moral clarity he had shown. The players moved around the diner, engaging with the few patrons and staff, creating an atmosphere that was vibrant yet intimate. They spoke of community, respect, and the importance of acknowledging courage wherever it appears. The young woman watched quietly, her heart swelling with emotion. She knew that the ordinary had transformed into something extraordinary tonight, not because of fame or media attention, but because of integrity, bravery, and the choices that define character. She remained silent, observing the interactions, savoring the moment without revealing her identity. The town, the diner, and the people within it were all part of something larger now, a story of heroism, surprise, and recognition that would ripple far beyond the small streets and humble walls. The presence of the U.S. women's soccer team brought with it a symbolic weight, connecting the quiet bravery of a single individual to the wider world and underscoring the universal truth that courage, no matter how small it seems, matters. As the team prepared to leave, they paused one last time by the counter, offering a collective gesture of thanks and acknowledgement. The waiter nodded, accepting their praise with modesty, his eyes glancing toward the young woman who had silently witnessed it all. In that moment, the invisible thread connecting them, the shared experience of courage, gratitude, and recognition, felt unbreakable. The door jingled one final time as the team departed, leaving the diner bathed in a renewed warmth, a sense of purpose, and the lingering echo of extraordinary moments. She exhaled softly, realizing that the night had cemented a story that would be remembered, not just for the fame of those who had arrived, but for the quiet heroism of the man who had chosen to act when it mattered most. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and the diner would never be the same again. Official recognition the following morning, the diner buzzed with a quiet excitement that felt almost ceremonial. Word had spread through the town about the U.S. women's soccer team's surprise visit the night before, and the anticipation of what was to come had transformed the ordinary streets into a stage of expectation. The townspeople whispered in hushed tones, speculating about the official recognition that was being arranged, and the diner, which had always been a humble and quiet place, now felt like the center of something monumental. The sheriff of the county arrived first, his polished uniform and steady demeanor signaling the importance of the event. He moved through the diner with careful attention, greeting locals who had gathered, and finally approaching the counter where the waiter, whose courage had sparked the entire chain of events, stood quietly. There was a sense of ceremony in the air, an unspoken acknowledgement that bravery deserves honor, even when it comes from the most unexpected places. He was called forward, his hands slightly trembling despite his composed exterior. The sheriff spoke with a firm, respectful tone, recounting the events of the previous evening, how an ordinary man had confronted 3 threatening individuals to protect a visitor, demonstrating courage, integrity, and selflessness. Every word resonated through the diner, reaching the ears of everyone present, reminding them that heroism often appears in the quietest forms. As the sheriff reached for the medal, a symbol of honor, respect, and recognition, the waiter's eyes widened subtly, a mixture of disbelief and humility crossing his face. He had acted out of instinct, without thought of reward, and now the acknowledgement felt surreal. The townspeople watched in reverent silence as the medal was carefully placed around his neck. Applause erupted, soft at first, then building into a heartfelt, unrestrained show of admiration. It wasn't just the formal recognition that mattered, it was the collective appreciation of an entire community acknowledging that courage matters. He looked around the diner, taking in the faces of those who had witnessed his actions, and his eyes landed briefly on the young woman who had quietly observed everything from her booth. Their gazes met, and a silent understanding passed between them. Gratitude did not need words. The shared experience of bravery, protection, and integrity had already created a bond stronger than any spoken acknowledgement. The sheriff continued, highlighting the importance of standing up for what is right, even when fear and uncertainty make it difficult. He emphasized that the actions of one person can ripple outward, influencing others, inspiring hope, and reinforcing the values that hold communities together. The waiter, listening attentively, felt the weight of his actions, not as a burden, but as a profound reminder of the responsibility and power inherent in everyday choices. Local business owners had gathered to contribute to the celebration as well. They presented small tokens of appreciation, gift cards, and letters recognizing the waiter's courage and the positive impact it had on the community. The diner itself received renewed attention, with the promise of sponsorships and events that would bring more visitors and recognition to the humble establishment. It was a celebration not only of personal bravery but also of community spirit, a reminder that acts of kindness and courage can transform the ordinary into something extraordinary. The young woman observed quietly, her heart swelling with emotion. She had remained anonymous, but the significance of the moment was not lost on her. She realized that heroism is not measured by fame, titles, or accolades. It is measured by action, by the willingness to act in moments of uncertainty, and by the integrity with which those actions are carried out. The waiter had demonstrated all of these qualities, and the recognition he received was not only deserved but essential, a testament to the fact that courage, when acknowledged, can inspire others to follow suit. As the ceremony concluded, the diner returned to a calm, steady rhythm, but the atmosphere had changed forever. The memory of the night's events, the courage displayed, and the recognition earned would linger in the hearts of all who had witnessed it. The young woman knew that this night, this small town, and this humble diner would forever hold a place in her own story, a chapter defined by bravery, gratitude, and the extraordinary potential of ordinary people. And as she walked toward the door, the metal shining subtly in the soft light around the waiter's neck, she felt a quiet certainty. Stories like these are rare, but when they happen, they leave a mark that transcends fame, fortune, and recognition. They remind us that humanity is defined by action, that courage exists in every corner, and that even the smallest acts can ripple outward to create something far greater than anyone could have imagined. Promoting the diner the morning after the official recognition, the diner was already buzzing with energy. The story of the waiter's bravery and the surprising visit of the U.S. women's soccer team had spread like wildfire. Locals and visitors alike were drawn to the small establishment, eager to witness the place where ordinary courage had transformed into something extraordinary. The diner's humble exterior, which had always been unassuming, now carried an almost magnetic pull, promising both warmth and the memory of a remarkable story. Business owners from around the town arrived, curious and enthusiastic, offering to collaborate on promotions to ensure the diner could flourish in the wake of this newfound attention. Flyers, local news coverage, and social media campaigns were all discussed, each one designed to honor the waiter's heroism while supporting the small business that had become the heart of the community's celebration. The diner, once known for its modest meals and quiet charm, was poised to become a hub of local pride and recognition. The waiter continued his duties, calm and professional, yet there was a subtle change in the way he carried himself. He was still humble, but the admiration of the town, combined with the attention from local businesses, reinforced the importance of his actions. Every handshake, every word of gratitude from a customer, reminded him that courage has the power to inspire, to create connections, and to elevate ordinary life into something meaningful. The young woman, watching discreetly from a booth, could see the ripple effect of the previous night's events. Families lingered longer over breakfast, speaking in hushed tones about bravery and integrity. Teens who had come in for a quick coffee were now engaged in conversations about standing up for what is right, inspired by a story that felt both personal and universal. She marveled at the way a single act of courage had sparked a chain reaction, influencing the behavior, attitudes, and conversations of an entire community. Local businesses, eager to contribute, organized partnerships with the diner. A nearby bakery offered to provide pastries for the restaurant's morning specials, while a local coffee roaster agreed to supply premium blends for the diner's growing clientele. Even a small printing shop volunteered to create commemorative merchandise, celebrating the waiter's bravery and the diner's place in the town's collective memory. These gestures, while practical in promoting the business, were also symbolic. The community was uniting around values that mattered, recognizing that courage, integrity, and kindness deserved amplification. As the week progressed, media attention began to trickle in from outside the town. Local newspapers published feature articles, radio stations shared interviews with townspeople, and even regional TV channels expressed interest in covering the story. The diner, once a quiet backdrop to ordinary life, became a symbol of how small acts of heroism can have profound, lasting effects. And through it all, the waiter remained at the center, not seeking fame or recognition, but quietly accepting the admiration and gratitude that naturally followed. The young woman, still keeping her identity a secret, watched the transformation unfold with a mixture of pride and reflection. She recognized that stories like these are rare, moments where courage meets opportunity, and the results ripple outward to affect the lives of many. The diner had become a living testament to the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things, a place where moral courage was celebrated, and integrity was honored in tangible ways. Even the team's surprise visit continued to have an impact. The players shared their experience on social media, praising not just the diner, but the waiter's courage and the town's warm reception. Fans across the country engaged with the story, leaving comments, sharing posts, and reflecting on how small gestures can change the course of events. The ripple effect was undeniable. What had started as a single night of bravery in a quiet diner had now captured attention on a national scale. By the end of the week, the diner had settled into a new rhythm. While the initial excitement had calmed, the effects were permanent. The space felt different now, charged with the memory of heroism, community support, and the transformative power of kindness. The waiter continued his work, each interaction imbued with the quiet dignity of someone who had acted with integrity and courage. The young woman, observing from her quiet corner, felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that the ordinary could truly become extraordinary, and that small actions could resonate far beyond the immediate moment. In the soft glow of the diner's lights, as customers came and went, she realized the truth of it all. Bravery doesn't need a stage, recognition can come quietly, and a single act of courage can inspire an entire community to embrace values worth celebrating. The diner, the town, and the people within it had been changed, not by fame, but by integrity, courage, and the unwavering choice to do what was right. The lasting legacy weeks had passed since the U.S. women's soccer team had made their surprise visit, and the diner had settled into a rhythm that was both familiar and transformed. The story of the waiter's bravery, amplified by the team's presence and the town's recognition, had become a living legend within the small community. It was more than a tale of courage. It had grown into a testament to the power of integrity, the strength of ordinary people, and the impact of small actions on the wider world. The diner, once quiet and understated, now pulsed with a quiet pride. Patrons came not just for meals, but for the experience, walking through the same doors where courage had stood firm, where a single act had sparked admiration, gratitude, and inspiration. Locals continued to bring their friends and family, eager to share the story and ensure that the legacy of that night endured. The diner had become a living monument to bravery, proof that heroism does not require fame or recognition, it requires only the willingness to act. The waiter carried himself with humility, yet there was a newfound confidence in his demeanor. He remained the same man who had polished glasses, served coffee, and quietly taken his place between danger and an innocent visitor. But the way the town now looked at him reflected a deeper understanding. They saw not just a diner worker, but a symbol of courage in the face of fear. Every handshake, every nod of respect, reinforced that heroism leaves traces far beyond the immediate moment. The young woman, still keeping her identity secret, returned occasionally, observing the lasting effects of that night. She noted how the community had shifted subtly, neighbors spoke more openly about standing up for one another, children shared the story in school as an example of integrity, and local businesses continued to support the diner with enthusiasm and generosity. The ripple effect of courage, she realized, could extend far beyond a single act, touching lives in ways both tangible and invisible. Even the media attention had enduring consequences. Articles and posts celebrating the diner and its hero drew visitors from neighboring towns, eager to witness firsthand the place where ordinary bravery had created extraordinary change. The U.S. women's soccer team occasionally referenced the story in interviews, emphasizing the importance of recognizing the quiet heroes who make a difference in everyday life. It was a reminder that heroism is not reserved for the spotlight. It can exist in small towns, humble spaces, and the hearts of ordinary people. The diner itself had become a hub of community activity. Local schools organized field trips, small business groups held meetings, and occasional celebratory events honored the values of courage, integrity, and altruism. What had once been a modest restaurant had transformed into a beacon of hope, proof that recognition and appreciation can empower not only the individual but an entire community. The young woman watched with a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her presence, though secret, had played a part in witnessing and safeguarding this story. The waiter's life had shifted in subtle but meaningful ways. While he remained committed to his daily routine, the acknowledgement and respect he received had opened doors, both literally and figuratively. Local leaders invited him to speak about courage and integrity, and the diner became a destination for those seeking to understand the real meaning of heroism. Yet, despite all the attention, he remained grounded, understanding that the truest measure of bravery is not in accolades but in the consistency of one's actions when no one is watching. For the young woman, the legacy was deeply personal as well. Her gratitude, though unspoken publicly, resonated in the choices she made and the quiet pride she carried. She realized that witnessing courage, not just fame or achievement, was one of the most powerful experiences one could have. It reminded her that the ordinary has the potential to be extraordinary, and that every act of integrity contributes to a larger tapestry of human goodness. As the sun set over the small town, the diner's windows glowed warmly, a symbol of endurance, courage, and community spirit. The streets outside were calm, but inside, the legacy of that night lived on in every conversation, every shared meal, and every nod of acknowledgement. The story had become part of the town's identity, a reminder that heroism can appear quietly, without fanfare, and yet leave a permanent mark on the world. In her heart, the young woman knew that some stories are never truly finished. They evolve, they ripple outward, and they inspire countless others to act with courage, kindness, and integrity. The diner, the town, and the people within it would carry that story forward, ensuring that the legacy of bravery, the legacy of a single ordinary man who chose to stand for what was right, would endure far beyond that small, unforgettable night. And as she walked away one last time, blending into the quiet streets, she smiled softly, knowing that the ordinary had become extraordinary, and that the world is forever shaped by those willing to act with courage, even when no one else is watching. A quiet legacy. Weeks had turned into months, yet the memory of that night lingered, like a soft echo in the small town. The diner, now thriving with visitors and community events, had become more than just a place to eat. It had become a symbol of courage, integrity, and the extraordinary power of ordinary people willing to stand up when it matters most. The waiter continued his daily routine, serving coffee and meals with the same quiet dedication, but everything had changed. People no longer saw him as just a part of the diner, they saw him as a hero. A man who, without seeking recognition, had chosen to act bravely in the face of danger. That bravery had rippled outward, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. Children talked about him in schools, neighbors shared the story with friends, and even strangers from nearby towns came to witness the place where courage had quietly reshaped a community. She returned once or twice, her presence always discreet, her identity unknown. Watching from the shadows, she felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the man who had protected her, but for the way his actions had inspired something larger than themselves. She realized that courage is contagious, that a single act can influence countless others, and that recognition, when heartfelt, can give ordinary lives extraordinary meaning. The town, the diner, and its people had transformed. Local businesses collaborated to celebrate integrity and community spirit. Events and gatherings honored bravery in ways small and meaningful, reminding everyone that heroism does not need a stage, it often exists quietly, in the everyday, in moments that may go unnoticed by the world at large. And though the story had gained attention from media, fans, and even social media, the true legacy remained intimate and enduring. It was found in the smiles exchanged over breakfast, in the nods of respect from strangers, in the unspoken understanding that doing what is right matters far beyond immediate recognition. As she walked away for the last time, she carried with her a profound truth: the world is full of ordinary people capable of extraordinary things. Courage, integrity, and kindness have a quiet power, one that can ripple through communities, transform lives, and leave a legacy far greater than fame or accolades. Some stories are not measured by headlines or applause. They are measured by the lives they touch, the hearts they inspire, and the hope they leave behind. And in that small town, in that humble diner, a quiet legacy of bravery had begun, one that would endure long after the doors closed each night.